I'm keeping the whole house for myself, and you get the broom and the mop." Those were the exact words that came out of my daughter Olivia's mouth while she laughed in my face. She actually cackled. It was a loud, ruthless laugh that echoed through the entire living room of the house. The same house I had paid for with years of sweat, with knees destroyed from scrubbing other people's floors, with hands wrinkled by bleach and cheap detergents. I stood there in front of her, with my 67 years weighing on me, feeling every word fall on me like heavy stones. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Olivia, my only daughter, the girl I had raised alone, the one I gave everything I could and much more than I had, was kicking me out of my own home. "You get the broom and the mop. Mom, that's what you're good for." And she laughed again. That laugh pierced my chest as if something inside me had finally shattered. I stood there, motionless, trying to process what had just happened. There were no screams, there was no struggle, just that cold laughter and those words that knocked the wind out of me. Liam, her husband, was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, watching the scene without saying a word. But in his silence, there was complicity. In his eyes, there was satisfaction. He wanted this too. Perhaps it was even his idea from the start. I had signed the papers 2 years ago, when Olivia convinced me it would be easier if the house was in her name. To avoid probate court and inheritance taxes, Mom, just to keep everything in order. Trust me. And I trusted her. Because she was my daughter. Because a mother always trusts her children, even if the whole world tells her not to. But what I didn't know, what I discovered just a few weeks ago when I checked the documents by chance, was that Olivia hadn't registered me as an owner or even a family member. She had registered me as a live-in housekeeper. As if I were just another worker in the house, someone hired to sweep and mop, someone without rights, without a voice, without anything. And now I was standing in front of her, listening to her say it openly, without shame, without remorse. "Look, Mom, you've already fulfilled your purpose here. I need this space. Liam and I are going to renovate everything. We're going to make this place modern, something dignified. You're just in the way. In the way." That phrase hit me harder than anything else. I was in the way in my own house. In the house I bought with money, I earned cleaning toilets, washing other people's laundry, cooking in homes where they never even offered me a glass of water. "And where am I supposed to go?" I asked her. My voice came out trembling, barely a thread of sound I managed to pull from somewhere deep in my throat. Olivia shrugged with an indifference that froze my blood. "I don't know, Mom. That's not really my problem anymore. You've always been good at cleaning. I'm sure you can get a job somewhere. Or you can go stay with one of those friends of yours you hang out with so much. But you can't stay here anymore." Liam let out a short, almost imperceptible laugh, but it was enough for me to know he was enjoying this. Both of them were enjoying it. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment for a long time, planning it in secret, savoring in advance the instant they would finally get me out of the picture. I felt my legs trembling. My whole body became heavy, as if I were suddenly carrying the weight of all the years I had lived, of all the humiliations I had swallowed in silence, of all the times I had made myself small so others could grow. But I didn't say anything else. I didn't beg. I didn't cry in front of them. Something inside me, something I still didn't fully understand, kept me firm in that moment. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was dignity. Or maybe it was simply that I no longer had the strength to keep begging for a place that should have been mine without discussion. Olivia walked to the door and threw it wide open. The cold afternoon air rushed into the living room like a gust, reminding me there was no turning back. "You have until tomorrow at noon to get your things out. And only the basics, Mom. No furniture. Nothing that belongs to the house. All of that is mine now." I stood looking at her. I tried to find in her face some trace of the little girl she had been. The girl who cried in my arms when she had nightmares. The girl who hugged me tight and told me I was the best mom in the world. But I found nothing. There was only a stranger, a hard, calculating woman looking at me as if I were an obstacle she had finally managed to clear from her path. I walked out of that house slowly, with heavy legs and a broken heart. I didn't take anything with me. Just my old purse with the documents I had managed to save and some money I had stashed in a tin can. $400. That was all I had left after 67 years of life. The door closed behind me with a dry thud. And with that thud, a part of my life closed as well, one that would never open again. I walked down the street without a destination. The sun was starting to set, and the city lights were turning on one by one. I could only think of one thing. My own daughter had kicked me out onto the street, and she had done it laughing. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Olivia looked at me with different eyes. There was a time when I was her hero, her refuge, her everything. I remember perfectly the day she was born. It was March 23rd, 42 years ago. I was 25 and completely alone. Olivia's father had left when he found out I was pregnant. He disappeared without a trace, without an explanation, without even having the courage to look me in the eye before leaving. He left me 3 months pregnant, without money, without a stable job, without close family to help me. But I decided to keep going. I decided that this child growing inside me was going to have everything I didn't have, that she was going to get an education, that she was going to have clean clothes, hot food, a safe roof, that she was never going to feel abandoned the way I felt so many times in my own childhood. I got work cleaning houses. At first, it was just 2 or 3 houses a week. I went with my belly growing, climbing stairs, carrying heavy buckets, breathing in the bleach fumes that made me dizzy. But I didn't complain. I couldn't complain. Every dollar I earned was a dollar closer to giving my daughter a decent life. When Olivia was born, I had nothing prepared. Nothing. A neighbor lent me an old crib, and another gave me some baby clothes her children didn't use anymore. I was sleeping in a rented room that barely had space for a bed and that crib. But when I held her in my arms for the first time, when I saw her closed eyes and her tight little fists, I knew I would do whatever was necessary for her. And I did. For years. I did it without rest. I worked from Monday to Sunday. I cleaned houses in the mornings, did laundry in the afternoons, cooked for families who paid me by the portion in the evenings. Olivia grew while I worked. I left her with Mrs. Barbara, an older neighbor who helped me by watching her for a few coins. Barbara was one of the few people who extended a hand to me in those difficult years. She understood what it was to struggle alone because she had also raised her children without help from anyone. Olivia kept growing, and I kept working. Every birthday of hers was a small victory for me. Every year that passed meant I had done it, that I had kept my daughter alive, healthy, fed. That was enough for me. I didn't need applause or recognition. I just needed to see her grow. When Olivia turned 6, I managed to save enough to get her out of that rented room and move into a slightly better place. It was a small 2-bedroom apartment in an older building, but it had large windows and the sunlight came in. Olivia was happy. I was too. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward, that things were starting to improve. I enrolled her in a nearby public school. I worked all day, but I always made it home in time to make her dinner and help her with her homework. It didn't matter how tired I was, how much my knees hurt, or how much my hands burned. Olivia was my priority. She always was. She was a sweet girl. Affectionate. She would hug me tight when I got home from work and tell me she missed me. She helped me set the table and told me everything she had learned in school. We had little, but we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. As Olivia grew up, I started noticing small changes. Small cracks in that relationship I thought was unbreakable. When she reached her teenage years, she started to be ashamed of me, of my job, of my worn-out clothes, of my rough hands and my tired body. I remember one day in particular. Olivia was 14, and I went to pick her up from school because she had forgotten her lunch at home. When I arrived, she was with a group of friends. She saw me from a distance, and her expression changed. I saw shame in her eyes. I saw discomfort. She took the lunch from my hands without looking me in the eye and told me to leave, that her friends didn't know I worked cleaning houses. That hurt. It hurt more than I was willing to admit. But I didn't say anything. I just turned around and left, swallowing my sadness, telling myself it was normal, that teenagers are like that she would grow out of it. But she didn't grow out of it. Over the years, that distance between us only grew. Olivia wanted things I couldn't give her. Brand-name clothes, new phones, outings with friends to expensive places. I did my best to please her, working more hours, taking extra jobs, saving every cent I could. But it was never enough. When Olivia finished high school, I managed to save enough for her to go to a technical college. It wasn't the Ivy League school she wanted, but it was an education. It was an opportunity. I kept working to pay for her tuition, to give her money for expenses, so she wouldn't have to worry about anything other than studying. And she studied. She graduated with a degree in business administration. She got a job in an office. She started making her own money. I was proud. So proud. I felt that all my effort had been worth it. That finally, Olivia would have a better life than mine. But it was also around that time that she met Liam. He worked at the same company, in a higher position. He came from a family with money. He had his own car, elegant clothes, refined manners. Olivia fell in love quickly. Or maybe she fell in love with the life Liam represented. I was never sure. From the beginning, Liam treated me with cold politeness. He spoke to me with superficial respect, but I could feel the disdain behind his words. To him, I was just his girlfriend's poor mother, someone to keep at a distance. When they got married, 5 years ago, I spent all my savings helping with the wedding. It wasn't a lavish wedding, but Olivia wanted it to be special. I paid for the dress, the decorations, part of the reception. I was left with nothing, but I saw my daughter happy that day, and I thought that was enough. After the wedding, Olivia and Liam moved in with me. They said it was temporary, just until they could save up for their own place. I accepted without hesitation. She was my daughter, my only family. Of course, they could stay as long as they needed. But months passed, and they didn't leave. Liam started complaining that the house was old, that it needed repairs. Olivia started suggesting that maybe it would be better if the house was in her name, that it would be easier to make improvements, that I was getting older and didn't need to worry about those things. I hesitated. Something inside me told me it wasn't a good idea, but Olivia insisted. She told me it was her inheritance anyway, that we were just speeding up the inevitable, that I should trust her, and I trusted her. I signed the papers. I transferred the house to her name, because she was my daughter, and I believed in her. The first days after Olivia kicked me out of the house were the darkest of my life. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have a plan. I only had those $400 in my purse and a feeling of emptiness so deep it was hard to breathe. The first night, I slept in the waiting area of the bus station. I sat on one of those hard plastic chairs, with my purse clutched tight against my chest, watching people come and go, families saying goodbye, couples hugging, people who had a clear destination. I had none of that. I only had fear. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I started to drift off, some noise would startle me awake. I was afraid someone would rob me. I was afraid of staying there forever. I was afraid of everything. When the sun came up, I left the station with an aching body and a soul even heavier than before. I walked the streets aimlessly. I passed a bakery, and the smell of fresh bread reminded me I hadn't eaten anything since the day before. But I didn't go in. I had to watch every penny. I didn't know how long those $400 would have to last me. I bought a coffee and a plain bagel at a street cart. $2. I sat on a park bench and tried to think about what I was going to do. But my mind was blank. I couldn't focus. I could only think about Olivia, about her laugh, about her words, about how she had looked at me as if I were nothing. For years I had worked until I destroyed my body. My knees were no longer the same after so many years kneeling to scrub floors. My hands were full of calluses, and my joints hurt constantly. My back reminded me every morning that I wasn't young anymore. But I had always kept going because I had a purpose. Because I had Olivia. Because everything I did was for her. And now she had taken that purpose away from me. She had taken everything away. I stayed in that park until it got dark. I saw mothers taking their children to play. I saw elderly couples walking hand in hand. I saw life taking its normal course for everyone except me. I was suspended in a limbo where nothing made sense. That second night, I slept in the same park. I curled up on a bench, using my purse as a pillow. It was cold, very cold. I didn't have a blanket, only the thin sweater I was wearing. I shivered for hours, hugging myself, trying to generate some warmth. It was on that bench, in the middle of the night, that I finally cried. I cried in silence, with tears rolling down my cheeks uncontrollably. I cried for everything I had lost, for the house that was no longer mine, for the daughter who had betrayed me, for the years I had wasted believing my sacrifice meant something. But above all, I cried for myself, for the woman I had been and who I didn't know if still existed, for the Eleanor who had fought so hard and was now lying on a park bench with nothing to show for a lifetime of work. On the third day, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had to find something, anything, a room to rent, a job, a reason to get up. I remembered that Barbara, the neighbor who had helped me watch Olivia when she was little, lived in a neighborhood not too far from there. I hadn't seen her in years. I didn't even know if she still lived in the same place. But I had no one else to turn to. I walked for over an hour until I reached her street. My feet hurt. I was wearing the same shoes since I left the house, and they had already given me blisters. But I kept walking. I had no other choice. When I got to her building, I stood in front of the door for several minutes. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know how to explain what had happened without dying of shame. But finally, I gathered the courage and rang the doorbell. Barbara opened the door, and for a moment, she didn't recognize me. So many years had passed. I had aged. I looked tired, haggard, broken. But when she finally recognized me, her eyes filled with concern. "Eleanor, is that you? Good heavens, what happened to you?" I couldn't answer. The words got stuck in my throat. I just stood there, at her door, with eyes full of tears I couldn't hold back. Barbara didn't ask any more questions. She took me by the arm and pulled me inside. She sat me on her sofa and brought me a glass of water. She sat beside me and waited. She waited with infinite patience until I could finally speak. And then I told her everything. I told her how I had put the house in Olivia's name, how I discovered she had registered me as a cleaning lady, how she had kicked me out of my own home, how I had spent the last few days with nowhere to go. Barbara listened in silence. When I finished speaking, I saw tears in her eyes too. She took my hands, those rough and tired hands that had worked so hard, and squeezed them tight. "You're staying here with me," she said. "It's not much, but there's room for you. You are not sleeping on the street one more day." I wanted to protest. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. But Barbara didn't let me say anything. She took me to a small room she used for storage, and between the two of us, we moved some boxes to make space. She put an old mattress on the floor and brought me clean sheets. "This isn't the Ritz, but it's yours as long as you need it. And I don't want to hear a single word about payment or anything like that. You helped me when I needed it. Now it's my turn." That night I slept on that mattress on the floor, and it was the best rest I had had in days. Not because it was comfortable, but because I was finally under a roof. I was finally safe. But even though my body rested, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I asked myself over and over how I had come to this. How was it possible that after working my whole life, after sacrificing everything for my daughter, I ended up with nothing? No home, no dignity, no future. I wondered if Olivia thought about me, if she regretted it even a little bit, if at any moment of her day she stopped to remember everything I had done for her. But deep down, I knew the answer. I knew that to Olivia, I no longer existed, that I had been erased from her life as easily as erasing a name from a list. The following days were a fog of sadness and confusion. Barbara tried to cheer me up, make me eat, take me out for walks, but I barely had the strength to get up from the mattress. I felt empty, as if something fundamental had been ripped out of me and I no longer knew how to function without it. One morning, Barbara came into the room with a cup of coffee and sat beside me. She looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen so much life and told me something I will never forget. "Eleanor, I know you're broken. I know you feel like there's no way out. But let me tell you something. Your daughter took your house. She took your security. But she can't take who you are. She can't take your strength. That strength that kept you standing all these years is still there. It's just sleeping. And when it wakes up, you're going to see that you are much more than what she made you believe." Barbara's words echoed in my head for days. She was right about something. I was still here. I was still breathing. I was still existing even though Olivia had tried to erase me from her life as if I had never mattered. Little by little, I started coming out of the room. At first, it was just to help Barbara with household chores. Sweeping, washing dishes, preparing lunch. Simple things my hands knew by heart. But at least they kept me busy. At least they gave me a small purpose while I tried to find a bigger one. Barbara had lived alone since her children moved to other cities. She was 72, and although her spirit was strong, her body wasn't the same. I saw how she struggled to climb the stairs, how her hands trembled when holding heavy things. So I started doing more, cooking for both of us, cleaning the whole house, accompanying her to the market when she needed to buy something. It was on one of those market days that Barbara ran into two friends of hers, Susan and Margaret. The three of them had known each other for decades and met regularly to drink coffee and talk. That day they introduced me as if I were someone important, not the broken woman I really was. "This is Eleanor," Barbara said with pride in her voice. "She is an incredible woman, and she's staying with me for a while." Susan was a slender woman of 68, with completely white hair tied in a bun. She had a piercing but warm gaze. Margaret was shorter and sturdy, 65 years old, with a contagious smile that lit up her sun-wrinkled face. Both greeted me with genuine kindness I didn't expect. They didn't ask uncomfortable questions. They didn't look at me with pity. They simply accepted me as part of the group from that first moment. "You should come with us to the coffee shop on Thursday," Margaret said. "We meet every week. It's just us three, but there's always room for one more." He hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to socialize. I wasn't sure I had anything to contribute to a conversation. But Barbara insisted, and finally, I accepted. Thursday arrived, and the four of us met at a small neighborhood diner. It was a simple place with old tables and mismatched chairs, but it had a cozy atmosphere that made me feel less out of place. We ordered coffee and sweet rolls and started talking. At first, I just listened. They talked about their lives, their children, the challenges they faced at their age. Susan had been abandoned by her husband after 30 years of marriage. Margaret had lost her partner 5 years ago and was still dealing with loneliness. Barbara had raised her 3 children practically alone while working in a textile factory. Each had her story of struggle. Each had faced betrayals, losses, disappointments. And yet, there they were, laughing, sharing, living. It was Susan who finally asked me directly what had brought me to stay with Barbara. I felt my throat close up. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to relive the humiliation. But something in the way she looked at me, with that warmth devoid of judgment, made me feel I could trust her. And I told them. I told them the whole story. From beginning to end. I told them how I had worked my whole life to give everything to Olivia. How I had put the house in her name, believing I was doing the right thing. How I was registered as an employee. How she had kicked me out laughing in my face. When I finished speaking, there was a heavy silence at the table. The 3 of them looked at me with expressions mixing sadness and contained rage. Margaret was the first to speak. Her voice was soft but firm. "That girl doesn't know what she lost. Someday she'll understand, but by then it will be too late." Susan nodded and added something that surprised me. "What your daughter did to you is unforgivable. But let me tell you something, Eleanor. The biggest mistake we women of our age can make is believing that because our children no longer need us, we no longer have value. That is a lie. Your value does not depend on Olivia. It never depended on her." Barbara took my hand across the table and squeezed it tight. "These women are right, and I'm going to add something else. You are 67 years old. That is not the end. That is just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where you can finally live for yourself." I wanted to believe them. I wanted to feel that strength they saw in me, but I still felt too broken, too lost. The following weeks, we continued meeting at that diner. Little by little, I started opening up more, participating in conversations, laughing at their stories, feeling part of something again. It was Margaret who suggested I look for work, something small to start, just to have some money of my own and regain a bit of independence. I was afraid of not being enough. afraid that no one would want to hire a woman my age with my worn-out body, but Margaret insisted. I know a lady who needs help cleaning her house twice a week. It's not much, but she pays $50 a day. I can recommend you if you want. $50. $100 a week. It wasn't enough to live on, but it was a start. It was something. I accepted, and so I started working again. The lady's name was Mrs. Catherine Kate Miller. She was a woman of about 50 who worked long hours outside the home and needed help keeping her place in order. She was kind to me, treated me with respect, paid me on time. Every time I received those $50, I felt a small spark of dignity light up inside me again. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had earned it with my work. No one could take it from me. Over time, Barbara suggested something else. Eleanor, your cooking is delicious. You've always done it well. Why don't you try selling food? I can help you. We can make hand pies or meatloaves and sell them in the neighborhood. The idea scared me at first. I didn't know if anyone would want to buy my food. I didn't know if I had what it took to do something like that. But Susan and Margaret also encouraged me. They said they would be willing to help, to spread the word, to be my first customers. We decided to try. One Saturday morning, Barbara and I got up early and prepared 3 dozen savory hand pies, beef and chicken. We used her oven and worked together, kneading, filling, folding. It was the first time in weeks that I felt genuinely useful doing something more than just surviving. When the pies were ready, we put them on trays covered with aluminum foil and went out to the street. Barbara knew a lot of people in the neighborhood. She stopped to talk to neighbors, offering them a taste of our pies. I stayed a step back, nervous, expecting rejection. But there was no rejection. People bought. Not everyone, but enough. We sold all 3 dozen in less than 2 hours. We made $45 after deducting the ingredients. $45. Barbara gave me half, $22.50. I held that money in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, small, fragile, but real. That Saturday marked the beginning of something new, something I couldn't see clearly yet, but that was there, growing slowly. The 4 of us continued meeting every week at the diner, and every week they reminded me that I was still worth something, that I still had a lot to give, that my story hadn't ended just because Olivia had decided to write me out of hers. Saturdays became my favorite day of the week. Barbara and I would wake up early, make savory pies or shepherd's pies, and go out to sell them around the neighborhood. Every week we sold a little more. People started waiting for us. Some even ordered in advance for small parties or family gatherings. I kept working with Mrs. Miller twice a week, and I guarded that money carefully. Every dollar I earned was one more step towards something I still couldn't fully define, but felt necessary. Independence, stability, dignity. After 2 months living with Barbara, I managed to save $300. It wasn't much, but it was something I had built all by myself with my effort. One afternoon, while I was counting the bills kept in a shoebox, Barbara came into the room and saw me. "What are you doing, Eleanor?" "I'm counting my savings. I want to see if I can look for a room for myself soon. I can't keep taking advantage of your generosity forever." Barbara sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at me with that serious expression she used when she was going to say something important. "Listen to me closely. You are not going anywhere until you are truly ready. And when I say truly ready, I don't just mean money. I mean that you are strong in here," she said, pointing to her chest. "Money comes and goes, but the strength of the heart is what keeps you standing when everything else fails." She was right. I still felt fragile. There were good days when I managed to smile and feel hopeful. But there were also dark days when I woke up thinking about Olivia, about how she had betrayed me, about everything I had lost. On those days it was hard to get up from the mattress, but the small victories helped me. Every pie sold, every positive comment from a customer, every bill I put in my box. They were like little lights illuminating a path I couldn't see before. One afternoon, Susan arrived at the diner with news. She knew someone who needed help preparing homemade food to sell in his small grocery store. It was Mr. Frank Robinson, owner of a store in the center of the neighborhood. He sold basic products but wanted to add homemade food to attract more customers. "I told him about you," Susan said with a smile. I told him you cook deliciously and that you are reliable. He wants you to go talk to him. I felt a mix of excitement and fear. It was an opportunity, a real chance to earn more money. But it also meant committing to something bigger. What if it wasn't enough? What if I failed? Barbara took my hand and gave me that push I needed so much. You are going. And you are going to show him what you are capable of. The next day I went to Mr. Robinson's store. It was a small but well-organized place, with shelves full of products and an old wooden counter. Frank was a man of about 60, with a gray mustache and a kind but serious expression. I introduced myself, and we talked for half an hour. I explained what I knew how to do: pies, casseroles, hearty stews, traditional desserts. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally. Finally, he made me a proposal. He wanted me to prepare food 3 times a week. He would give me the ingredients and pay me $80 for each delivery, $240 a week. It was more money than I had seen together in a long time. I accepted without thinking twice. I started working for Mr. Robinson the following week. I got up at 5 in the morning to cook in Barbara's kitchen. I prepared stews, roast chicken and stuffing, lentil soup with sausage, everything in large quantities. Barbara helped me when she could, but I did most of the work alone. It was exhausting. My body wasn't young anymore, and the long hours standing in the kitchen took their toll. My knees hurt more than ever. My back protested every time I lifted a heavy pot. But I didn't complain. I couldn't complain. This was my chance to rebuild my life, and I wasn't going to waste it. The food I prepared sold fast at Mr. Robinson's store. Customers started asking for me, requesting specific dishes, leaving positive comments. Frank was happy. So happy that after a month he proposed increasing to 4 deliveries a week. $320 a week. More than $1,200 a month. It was more than I had earned in years. For the first time since Olivia kicked me out, I felt there was light at the end of the tunnel. With that money, I could start contributing more to Barbara's household. I gave her money for expenses. I bought the ingredients I needed to cook. I even bought her a pair of new shoes she needed but didn't want to spend money on. She protested, but I insisted. It was the least I could do after everything she had done for me. I also started taking care of myself a little more. I bought new clothes, something simple but clean and in good condition. I went to get a haircut for the first time in months. When I saw myself in the mirror at the salon, I almost didn't recognize myself. I was still a 67-year-old woman with wrinkles and gray hair, but there was something different in my eyes. There was a spark I thought I had lost forever. The coffee meetings continued every Thursday. Now I arrived with stories to tell. I told them about my customers, the comments I received about my food, how tired but satisfied I felt at the end of each day. Margaret looked at me with maternal pride. See, I told you. You had a lot to give. You just needed the chance. But not everything was easy. There were nights when I lay on the mattress and thought about Olivia. I wondered if she knew what I was doing, if she cared, if she ever thought about me. Those thoughts kept me awake for hours, turning over questions that had no answers. One night, Barbara found me sitting in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold long ago. Can't sleep? I shook my head. She sat across from me without saying anything for a while. Then she spoke with that wisdom that only comes from having lived a lot. Eleanor, you're going to think about her. That's natural. She's your daughter. But you have to understand something important. You cannot control what Olivia thinks or feels. You can only control what you do with your life. And what you are doing now is building something beautiful. Don't ruin it waiting for her to see it or value it. She was right. I was allowing Olivia to keep controlling my life even from a distance. I had to let that go. I had to focus on me. Months passed, and my routine became more solid. I worked for Mr. Robinson, cleaned Kate Miller's house, and on Saturdays kept selling in the neighborhood with Barbara. My body was tired, but my spirit was stronger than ever. After 6 months, I managed to save $2,000. $2,000 that were completely mine. No one had given them to me. No one could take them from me. I had earned them with my work, with my effort, with my determination. One afternoon, while counting the money in my box, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, real hope that I could have a future. That my life hadn't ended when Olivia kicked me out. That maybe, just maybe, the best was yet to come. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't imagine in that moment, was that my life was about to change in a way I would have never expected. That a casual conversation in Mr. Robinson's store was going to open a door that would change everything. That door was about to open. And on the other side was something that would transform not only my financial situation, but the way I saw myself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. I had just delivered the food to Mr. Robinson's store and was packing up the empty containers when I heard a heated conversation near the counter. A man in a suit was talking to Frank in a tone of voice that mixed desperation and urgency. I didn't want to be nosy, so I tried to focus on my business, but it was impossible not to hear. "Frank, I need your help. It's for this Friday. A corporate event with 80 people and the catering company I hired just canceled. They say they had a problem with their kitchen. I don't know what to do. My reputation is on the line." The man ran his hands through his hair, visibly distressed. Frank shook his head, sympathetic but helpless. "James, I'd like to help you, but I don't know anyone who can handle something like that on such short notice. 80 people isn't something just anyone can do." The man, James, let out a long sigh of frustration. I continued packing my things, but something inside me stirred. 80 people, corporate food. It was a huge challenge. Impossible for someone like me. Or maybe not. Before I could think better of it, my words came out on their own. "Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but what kind of food do you need?" Both men turned to look at me. James observed me with surprise, as if he just realized there was someone else in the store. Frank looked at me with a mix of concern and curiosity. James hesitated a moment before answering. "I need traditional food, authentic, nothing fancy, but well done. The event is for international partners who want to experience genuine local food." Originally, I had ordered pot pies, meatloaf, macaroni and cheese, green beans, salads. A full menu for 80 people. I did a quick calculation in my head. 80 people, 3 days to prepare everything. It was crazy. But Frank intervened before I could say anything. "James, this is Eleanor. She's the one who prepares the food I sell here. What she does is excellent, but this is much bigger than she has handled before." James looked at me with more attention this time. I could see the desperation in his eyes. He was a man of about 45, well-dressed, with that air of a successful professional teetering on the edge of disaster. "Do you think you could do it?" he asked me directly. My first instinct was to say no. It was too much. It was risky. What if I failed? What if it wasn't enough? But then I thought about the last few months, about how I had been rebuilding my life, piece by piece, about Barbara's words about being strong on the inside, about all those small steps that had brought me here. "I can do it," I said with a firmness that surprised myself. "But I need you to give me the exact details of what you want, and I need an advance to buy the ingredients." James took out his phone and started taking notes while I explained what I could prepare. We talked for half an hour. He gave me specifications. I gave him suggestions based on my experience. Finally, we reached an agreement. "I'll pay you $1,500, $750 now, and the rest when you deliver the food on Friday at 2 in the afternoon. $1,500. It was more money than I had earned in months, but it was also a huge responsibility. A responsibility that could ruin everything if I failed. I accepted. James gave me his card and took out his wallet. He counted $750 in cash and handed them to me right there. My hands trembled slightly as I took the money. When James left, Frank looked at me with a serious expression. "Eleanor, are you sure about this? It's a lot of work, a lot of pressure." I put the money in my purse and looked him in the eye. "I have to try. If I don't, I'm never going to know what I'm capable of." I left the store with my heart pounding in my chest. I walked fast back to Barbara's house. I needed to tell her. I needed her help. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for accepting this. When I arrived, Barbara was in the kitchen making tea. I told her everything in one breath, without stopping. She listened to me in silence until I finished. Then she smiled. That wide, warm smile that had sustained me through so many difficult months. Let's do it. Let's call Susan and Margaret. The four of us together can pull this off. That same night, the four of us gathered in Barbara's kitchen. I explained the situation. I showed them the money. I told them exactly what I needed to do. And without hesitating for a second, they all agreed to help me. Wednesday morning, we started. Barbara and I went to the market early and bought everything we needed. Meat, chicken, vegetables, flour for the pies, ingredients for the meatloaf, potatoes, green beans. We spent $400 on ingredients. When we returned, Susan and Margaret were already waiting for us. We transformed Barbara's kitchen into a small factory. We divided the tasks. Barbara and Margaret took charge of the pot pies. Susan and I worked on the meatloaves. We all cooked the mashed potatoes and the green beans in large batches. We worked from 6 in the morning until 11 at night. My hands were sore. My back screamed with pain. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Thursday continued. The pies needed oven time. The meatloaves had to be baked in small batches because Barbara's oven wasn't very big. The potatoes had to be perfect. The green beans had to have the exact seasoning. Margaret suggested we also prepare a special gravy to go with it. Susan proposed making a fresh garden salad. Barbara insisted we make a dessert too, something simple but delicious. Individual cheesecakes. We worked non-stop. Sometimes we laughed from exhaustion. Sometimes we kept silent, concentrated on our tasks. But we never stopped. Friday morning, at 8 o'clock, everything was ready. 80 portions of each dish. Everything carefully packaged in disposable containers we had bought. The gravy in small sealed tubs. The fresh salads prepared that same morning. The desserts refrigerated and ready to serve. We stood looking at everything we had achieved. Barbara's kitchen looked like a war zone, but on the table was a complete banquet for 80 people. Barbara had tears in her eyes. "We did it, Eleanor. We really did it." I felt like crying too, but not from sadness. From something different. From pride. From satisfaction. From a strength I didn't know I still had inside me. We called a large taxi to take all the food. James had given us the address of a hotel downtown where the event would take place. We arrived at 1:30 in the afternoon, half an hour earlier than agreed. James was waiting for us at the entrance of the event hall. When he saw the amount of food we brought, his expression of worry transformed into relief. He helped carry everything inside. The hotel staff organized the buffet tables. I stayed to supervise that everything looked right, that everything was in its place. At 2 o'clock sharp, the guests started arriving. Men and women in suits, clearly important executives. James introduced me as the chef in charge of the catering. Chef. No one had ever called me that before. The guests started serving themselves. I watched from the side, with my heart in my throat. Would they like it? Would it be good enough? And then I started hearing the comments. In Spanish, in English, in other languages I didn't understand, but the tone was universal. Satisfaction, pleasure, approval. A woman approached James and said something to him that he translated for me later. She says this is the best homemade food she has tasted since she arrived in the country. She wants to know if she can hire your services for another event. James looked at me with a huge smile. "Eleanor, this is a total success." When the event ended and the guests began to leave, James approached me with an expression I hadn't seen before. It was a mix of genuine gratitude and something else, respect. He was looking at me with respect. "Eleanor, you saved my life. I have no words to thank you for what you did. The food was impeccable. Several of the partners asked me for your contact information." He took out his wallet and handed me the remaining $750. But then he added 3 more $100 bills. "This is extra. For the exceptional quality and for pulling it off in such short time. $1,800 in total." I held the money in my hands and felt that something fundamental had changed inside me. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. The confirmation that I could still do important things, that I still had value. James didn't stop there. He took out his phone and asked for my number. I gave him the number to Barbara's house because I didn't have my own phone. He wrote it down carefully. "I'm going to recommend you to all my contacts. And I want to hire you again myself. I have another event in 3 weeks. Smaller, Only 40 people, but with a better budget. Would you be interested? Of course. I was interested. I accepted without hesitation. When I returned to Barbara's house that afternoon, the three of them were waiting for me anxiously. I showed them the money and told them everything. The positive comments, the people who wanted to hire me, the new event already confirmed. Barbara insisted that the three of them deserved part of the money. They had worked as hard as I had during those 3 exhausting days. We divided the $1,800 into equal parts, $450 for each one. But Margaret shook her head. No, Eleanor. This is your business. Your opportunity. We helped you because we are friends, not because we expected payment. Keep that money. You're going to need it. Susan and Barbara agreed. I argued with them for half an hour, but they didn't budge. Finally, we reached a compromise. I would keep $1,000 and give $250 to each of them, not as payment, but as a thank you. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning with the possibilities. If one event had given me $1,800, how much could I earn if I got more? Could I turn this into something bigger? Could I really build a business? Monday morning, James called Barbara's house. He had news. 3 of the executives from Friday's event wanted to hire me. One for a family dinner of 20 people, another for a corporate birthday of 30 people, and the third for a business breakfast for 15 people. He gave me the phone numbers for all 3. Over the next few days, I coordinated everything: dates, menus, budgets. By the end of that week, I had 4 events confirmed in the next 3 weeks. The potential income was over $4,000. $4,000. It was more money than I had seen together in my entire life. But it also meant more work. Much more work. I couldn't keep using just Barbara's kitchen. I couldn't keep depending on my friends to help me with every event. I needed to organize myself better. I needed to think bigger. It was Susan who suggested something I hadn't considered. Eleanor, why don't you rent a space, a small place where you can cook in bulk? With professional equipment, you could hire help when you need it. The idea scared me. Renting a space meant commitment. It meant fixed expenses. It meant taking a step I couldn't easily reverse. But it also meant taking my future seriously. It meant believing in myself in a way I had never done before. During the following week, while I prepared the confirmed events, I started looking for options. I walked around the neighborhood asking, looking at empty storefronts, checking prices. I found a small space in the back of a commercial building. It wasn't pretty. It had peeling walls and cracked cement floors, but it had a functional kitchen with an old industrial stove, a large sink, and enough space to work. The rent was $350 a month. $350. It was a huge amount for someone who just a few months ago was sleeping on park benches. But I looked at that empty space and saw possibilities. I saw a future. I rented it. With the money left over from the events, I bought basic utensils, large pots, pans, decent knives, cutting boards. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. The day I received the keys to that place, I stood in the middle of the empty space for a long time. The walls needed paint. The floor needed a deep clean. There was so much to do, but it was mine. Well, not mine, it was rented. But it was my space. My place to work. My opportunity. Barbara, Susan, and Margaret came to help me clean it. We spent a whole day scrubbing floors, cleaning walls, organizing equipment. When we finished, the place didn't look luxurious, but it looked clean, functional, ready. The events continued, one after another. Each one brought me more contacts, more recommendations, more work. James became my regular client, hiring me for different events at his company every few weeks. But the most important event came a month later. James called me with a different proposal. Eleanor, I have something big, a year-end event for 150 people, executives, international partners, important staff. They want something special, something memorable. And I want you to do it. 150 people. It was double the size of the biggest thing I had done so far. The budget he offered me was $5,000. $5,000 for one event. But there was a problem. It was in 2 weeks, and I couldn't handle it alone. I needed real help, paid help. I talked to Barbara, Susan, and Margaret. All three agreed to help me as a formal team. I would pay each of them $200 for their work during those 2 weeks of preparation. They accepted happily. I also hired 2 more women from the neighborhood who needed work, Emily and Sarah, both with kitchen experience. I would pay them $150 each. During those 2 weeks, my small shop transformed into a full operation. 6 women working together, cooking, preparing, organizing. The space that had seemed so empty was now full of life, of laughter, of the smell of homemade food. We worked until exhaustion. My knees screamed with pain every night. My back barely let me sleep. But I kept going. We all did. The day of the event arrived. We rented a van to transport all the food. We arrived at the hotel 2 hours early to set everything up. This time the event was more formal. They had servers who would serve the food. I just had to make sure everything was perfect. And it was. The 150 guests ate. They enjoyed. They commented. They congratulated. James introduced me to several of the directors. Everyone wanted my business card. I didn't have cards. I hadn't thought about that. But I wrote my information on napkins for 5 different people who wanted to hire me. When the event ended and James paid me the $5,000, I sat in a corner of the empty hall and let everything sink in. I had come so far. From that park bench where I cried without hope to this moment, holding $5,000 I had earned with my work, with my talent, with my effort. It hadn't been easy. Every step had hurt. Every day had been a struggle. But I had done it. And most importantly, I had done it alone. Well, not completely alone. I had had invaluable help from Barbara, Susan, and Margaret. But no one had given me anything for free. No one had come to save me. I had saved myself. The following months were a whirlwind of constant activity. The event for 150 people had opened doors I never imagined existed. The 5 people I had given my information to that night contacted me, and each of them recommended me to someone else. Suddenly I had more work than I could handle alone. Events every week, sometimes 2 or 3 in the same week. Small weddings, corporate celebrations, family parties, business breakfasts. The variety was incredible, and every event was different. I hired Emily and Sarah permanently. I paid them a fixed salary every week, plus bonuses for big events. Barbara, Susan, and Margaret continued helping me when they could, although no longer on a regular basis. They had their own lives, and I didn't want to abuse their generosity. With the constant income, I was able to equip the shop better. I bought a new industrial stove, a larger refrigerator, more professional utensils. I painted the walls a soft cream color that made the space feel cleaner and more welcoming. I put up organized shelves for ingredients and supplies. I also did something I never thought I would do. I ordered business cards. Simple cards with my name, the name of my business, which I had decided to call Eleanor's Homestyle Catering, and my contact number. When I received them and held one in my hands, I felt an emotion hard to describe. It was something so small, but it meant so much. After 6 months of constant work, I had saved $15,000. $15,000 that I had earned with my effort. I opened a bank account to keep the money safe. The first time I walked into the bank to deposit that money, the teller treated me with professional respect. She didn't see me as an elderly woman without resources. She saw me as a businesswoman. I was also finally able to move out of Barbara's house. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment a few blocks from the shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. It had a comfortable bed, a functional kitchen, a clean bathroom. It was my space, my home. Barbara cried the day I moved out, not from sadness, but from pride. She hugged me tight and whispered in my ear something I will never forget. "Look how far you came, Eleanor. Look at the woman you are now." And she was right. I wasn't the same woman who had been kicked out onto the street with only $400 and a broken heart. That woman had died on that park bench. The woman I was now had been born from those ashes. She was stronger, more confident, more aware of her own value. The events kept coming. James had become my most consistent client and something like a friend. He recommended me endlessly to his professional contacts. Thanks to him, I got contracts with 3 different companies that needed regular catering for their monthly meetings. One day, James proposed something different. He wanted me to consider opening a small restaurant. He said my food was too good to be limited only to events, that I could have a stable business with daily customers. The idea tempted me, but it also scared me. A restaurant meant an even bigger commitment. More expenses, more responsibilities, more risk. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but I did invest in my catering business. I bought a small used van to transport the food more easily. I hired a 3rd employee, a young woman named Chloe, who had arrived looking for work and proved to be efficient and reliable. My routine was exhausting but satisfying. I got up at 5 in the morning every day, went to the shop at 6, supervised food preparation, coordinated with clients, managed inventory, kept the books, returned to my apartment around 9 at night. I slept little. My body protested constantly, but every morning I got up with a clear purpose. Every day I built something more solid. Every week I saw grow what had started as a simple, desperate attempt to survive. Sometimes, at night, I sat in my small apartment and thought about everything that had happened, about how I had gotten there, about the decisions I had taken, about the people who had helped me, about the strength I didn't know I had, and I also thought about Olivia. I couldn't help it. She was my daughter. No matter how much she had hurt me, no matter how much she had betrayed me, she was still my daughter. I wondered how she was, what she was doing, if she ever thought about me. But it wasn't the same kind of obsessive thinking that kept me awake in those first months. Now it was more of a distant curiosity, like wondering about someone you knew a long time ago but who is no longer part of your life. 1 year after that day, Olivia kicked me out of the house. My business was completely established. I had regular clients, a reliable team, stable income. I had saved almost $30,000. $30,000 that represented not just money, but dignity, independence, future. James organized a small celebration in my honor. He invited several of my regular clients and introduced me as the best chef of homemade food in the city. I felt uncomfortable with so much attention, but also deeply grateful. These people had given me opportunities. They had trusted me with their important events. They had treated me with respect. During the celebration, a woman approached me. She was elegant, about 50 years old, with an air of natural authority. She introduced herself as Victoria Chase, owner of a corporate event agency. "I've tasted your food at several events," she told me, "and I've heard nothing but positive comments about you. I'd like to propose something." She explained that her agency organized large events for international companies. They needed reliable catering providers who could handle events of 100 to 300 people with consistent quality. She wanted to include me in her list of preferred vendors. That would mean regular events, good contracts, exposure to even bigger clients. It was another door opening, another opportunity that a year ago would have seemed impossible. I accepted without hesitation. The following months were even more intense. The contracts with Victoria's agency brought bigger and better paid events. I had to hire 2 more employees, 5 people working with me now. I had to rent an additional space for storage because the original shop had become too small. My income doubled. Then it tripled. I no longer counted dollars with worry. I no longer wondered if I would have enough to pay rent or buy food. Now I thought about investments, about growth, about possibilities. I bought new equipment, a bigger van, uniforms for my team, professional advertising material. I even hired someone to help me with social media because several clients had told me I should have an internet presence. Barbara, Susan, and Margaret visited me regularly at the shop. They sat down to drink coffee with me and told me the neighborhood news. But above all, they looked at me with that mix of pride and satisfaction that only true friends can feel when they see someone they love succeed. One day, Susan said something to me that made me reflect. "Have you realized that you don't talk about Olivia anymore? You haven't mentioned her in months." She was right. At some point, without realizing it, I had stopped thinking about her constantly. I had stopped turning over her betrayal. I had stopped expecting her to appear asking for forgiveness. I had simply moved on with my life. It wasn't that I had forgiven her. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her, but I had stopped allowing what she did to define who I was. I had built a new identity, a new life, a new future, and that future was bright. It was a Saturday afternoon, 18 months after Olivia kicked me out of the house, when I received the call I never expected to receive. I was at the shop supervising the preparation of a big event when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered thinking it would be a new client. "Mom?" The voice went through me like a lightning bolt. It was Olivia. After all this time, it was Olivia. I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. Rage, sadness, confusion, everything mixed in my chest in a way that left me speechless. "Mom, it's me. Olivia, I need to talk to you." Her voice sounded different, trembling, weak. Nothing like that cruel laugh that had been the last thing I heard from her. "What do you want?" I managed to say finally. My voice came out colder than I expected. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard something that surprised me. Crying. Olivia was crying. "Mom, things are bad. Very bad. Liam and we lost everything. He made bad investments. We got into debt. The bank took the house, your house. We have nowhere to live. We have nothing." I listened to her words, but I didn't feel what I expected to feel. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel revenge fulfilled. I just felt a strange emptiness, as if I were listening to a stranger's story. "I need your help, Mom. Please. We have no one else. We need money, a place to stay, whatever you can give us." There it was, the reason for her call. It wasn't genuine regret. It wasn't a desire for reconciliation. It was necessity. It was desperation. It was the same attitude as always, only now she was the one who had nothing. "Where are you now?" I asked. "In a cheap motel. But we can only pay for 2 more nights. After that, I don't know what we're going to do." I closed my eyes and breathed deep. A small part of me, that part that would always be her mother, felt pain for her situation. But another part, the part that had grown during these 18 months, knew I couldn't rescue her. Not again. "Olivia, do you remember what you told me the last time we saw each other?" She stayed quiet. "You told me to keep the broom and the mop. You laughed in my face while you kicked me out of my own house. You registered me as an employee so I wouldn't have any rights. You treated me as if I were nothing. Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Liam convinced me. I didn't want to. Don't lie to me anymore. Olivia, you wanted to. You made those decisions. And now you have to live with the consequences. Please, Mom. We're your family. Your only family." That word. Family. It had stopped meaning the same thing to me a long time ago. Family wasn't just the people you shared blood with. Family were the people who supported you when you were down. The ones who extended a hand without asking for anything in return. The ones who celebrated your triumphs and cried for your defeats. Barbara, Susan, Margaret, they were my family now. I'm not going to give you money. Olivia, I'm not going to give you a place to live. Not because I'm cruel, but because you need to learn what I learned. That no one is going to save you except yourself. Mom, you can't do this to us. Yes, I can. And I am. You have to find your own path. Like I had to find mine when you left me with nothing. I hung up the phone before she could answer. My hands were trembling. My heart was beating fast. But I didn't regret it. That night, after we finished the day's event, I sat with Barbara, Susan, and Margaret in the empty shop. I told them about Olivia's call. I told them what I had decided. The 3 of them listened to me in silence. When I finished, it was Barbara who spoke first. "Do you feel bad about your decision?" I thought about her question carefully before answering. "No, I don't feel bad. I feel at peace." And it was true. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel remorse. I felt peace. Because I had finally set boundaries. I had finally chosen myself. The following days, Olivia tried to call several more times. I didn't answer. She sent me long text messages alternating between pleas and accusations. I didn't respond. Finally, the messages stopped coming. Weeks later, out of curiosity, I looked up on the internet what had happened to the house. I found that it had indeed been foreclosed on by the bank. Olivia and Liam had lost everything, just as she had told me. A small part of me felt pity, but it was a distant pity, like the kind you feel for someone you read about in the news. It no longer affected me the way I would have expected. My life continued. My business kept growing. Victoria Chase connected me with more important clients, bigger and bigger events. Contracts paid better and better. 2 years after the day Olivia kicked me out, I finally made the decision I had been considering for months. I opened a small restaurant. It wasn't big or luxurious, but it was mine. It was called The Hearth, just like my catering service. The restaurant served breakfast and lunch from Monday to Saturday. Traditional homemade food, the same dishes I had prepared for years, but now in a place where people could come sit and enjoy. I hired more staff. We trained together. We established quality standards. We created a menu that changed weekly, but always kept the favorites. The restaurant was a success from day one. People lined up to get a table. The online reviews were excellent. Customers returned again and again. James came to the opening. Victoria, too. All my regular catering clients. And of course, Barbara, Susan, and Margaret, sitting at the best table with tears of pride in their eyes. That night, after everyone left, I stayed alone in the empty restaurant. I walked among the tables, touched the walls I had painted, looked at the kitchen I had equipped. All this was mine. I had built it, with my work, with my talent, with my determination. I thought about the Eleanor from 2 years ago, the broken woman sleeping on park benches, the woman who believed her life was over, the woman who thought she was worth nothing because her daughter had told her she was worth nothing. That woman no longer existed. The woman I was now knew her value. She knew what she was capable of. She knew she didn't need anyone's approval to be someone important. 3 years later, my business included the restaurant, the catering service, and a new project, cooking classes on Sundays, where I taught other women to cook traditional dishes. The classes were always full. I employed 15 people. All women, some young, some my age, all with their own stories of struggle, all looking for an opportunity to build something better. I gave them that opportunity. I paid them well. I treated them with respect. I taught them not just to cook, but to believe in themselves. Because I knew what it was to have nothing and have to build everything from scratch. One Sunday afternoon, after a cooking class, one of my students approached me. She was a woman of about 65 who had started coming a month ago. "Eleanor, can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "How did you make it this far?" "My daughter put me out of her house 6 months ago, and I don't know how to move forward." I looked her in the eyes and saw my own reflection from years ago. I saw the pain, the confusion, the fear, but I also saw something else. I saw strength. The same strength I had had inside all this time without knowing it. I told her my story. Not everything, but enough. I told her about the betrayal, the darkest days, how I had found the strength to get up. I told her about Barbara, Susan, and Margaret. I told her about small victories that became big achievements. When I finished, she had tears in her eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. That same day, I decided to start a support group. Any woman who wanted to come on Thursday afternoons was welcome. Women who had been betrayed by their families. Women who had lost everything. Women who needed to remember that they still had value. The group grew quickly. Every week there were more women. We shared stories. We supported each other. We reminded each other that we were not alone. And so, my life found an even deeper purpose than just financial success. I found meaning in helping other women rise up, like I had risen up. I never heard from Olivia again. Sometimes I wondered where she was, how she was. But it no longer caused me pain. It was simply a passing curiosity. Because I had learned something fundamental. Your value does not depend on how people who are supposed to love you treat you. Your value is in yourself, in your ability to get up, in your strength to keep going, in your decision not to allow anyone to define who you are. At 70 years old, I had more than I ever imagined possible. A prosperous business, my own home, savings in the bank, people who depended on me and respected me, true friends who were my chosen family. But more important than all that, I had something I had lost for so many years. I had myself, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.